Let me know when we're good, Cheryl.
Yep, I'm just setting up Zoom.
We're not even 7. It's not even 7 yet.
Okay, so we're good.
Okay, let's bring the meeting to order. Let me get my agenda. All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right, we'll go right into the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Is there anything that anyone wants to discuss more? Poll for more discussion? Anything at all from anybody?
I just had one question. I didn't know, and this is a very minor thing. Oh my gosh. Paige Emerson, is she starting her leave on February of next year?
Oh, no.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyone?
I had one on the 6th grade science teacher. Was that a replacement?
Yes, that is, we have a retirement in January.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, so let's go to, where are we here? Just a point of clarification, the number 16 doesn't have an asterisk. Is that is still consent?
It is. Yes, it is. Yep, it's just missing it. Sorry about that.
All right. All right, so why don't we go to building systems for education?
Great. So we have invited folks from Education Elements, and I just wanted to say before my arrival in district, there was and still is, much to Caroline's credit, some really great work happening around equity. Right, a couple of things. 3 administrators are currently completing the initial training with Paul Gorski, and he's the founder of Equity Literacy Institute, which will yield roughly 30 teacher training seats in Paul Gorski's sessions on equity and education. We've also been purchasing culturally responsive texts for each of our schools. We've also secured spaces for every staff member and Dr. Ross Green's collaborative proactive solutions training. And that's when we work with students on problem solving together collaboratively on lagging skills and unsolved problems that will help them be successful in school and beyond.
Laura?
And we're also planning with Dutchess County BOCES that includes a focus on equity and trauma-informed education. Recently, we've partnered with Education Elements. We have 3 folks here, I see, to continue our work around equity. We are particularly excited about this partnership because it becomes a more of a systematic and systemic approach to this important work, with the goal of developing a culture of equity across our district by including all stakeholders in this journey. So tonight, I'm happy to introduce Gabby, Dana, and Dave to speak about Education Elements, methodology, and our work together. So take it away, Dana, Gabby, and Dave. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks everyone for having us. I don't know that I've ever had an introduction like that, so I really appreciate it. But we know that this is a busy season, and so we're just so appreciative that you're letting us have a bit of your board time to share some of our partnership and what we hope will be a really powerful consortium in the Dutchess BOCES region. And Laura, I'm not sure if I have screen sharing privileges, but if I can, that would, we have some slides that we'd love to share with you just about our approach. What we'd love to do is spend maybe about 30 minutes, potentially less than that. We try and be pretty efficient with this, just sharing our approach and what you can expect. And then we want to reserve any time for you to have, ask us questions We also don't want you to feel like you have to hold them to the end, right? We're pretty informal. So if you want to interrupt us, if you have a question that would be pretty relevant to share right away, feel free to, just stop us and ask. We're here to answer any of the questions that you have.
Cheryl, can you give access?
Yep.
Thank you.
I like all the festive. I feel left out that I don't have my festive decor in the background. All right,
Should have
awesome. So
access.
okay, perfect. All right, thanks, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
All right, so like Laura shared, I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Dana and Dave, and I'm really excited, particularly about the team that we're bringing to you today and what we hope will be this partnership. Dave Hardy has a lot of experience working on the district level in all roles up to superintendent. I'll let him sort of share a little bit about his background. But internally as an organization, he's also been really pushing our equity efforts, and he's been leading the work in how we might support districts around that, both in thinking about his perspective in former leadership roles and also his work within our company. And Dana's really been leading a lot of our partnerships in the state of New York. And so, we'll be able to share not only our approach, but also what this potentially looks like in terms of some of the connections and partnerships that we've made in the region. I'm Gabby Hewitt. I'm calling in from Pittsburgh by way of New Orleans. So I claim the Saints and not the Steelers. I don't know if there's any Bills fans in the room. But wanted to start by just sharing a little bit about our company, not too much, but just want to share sort of what we're about. We are a national consulting firm, and we really made a name for ourselves in the space of creating more student-centered experiences at the classroom level. So you've probably heard terms like personalized learning or blended learning. What we have recognized, though, in any of the initiatives that we partnered with districts on, there's always a period of immense growth. And then there's usually a period where an initiative might stagnate or it might even plateau. And in conversations that we've had with teachers and leaders around what that looks like, and it doesn't matter what we're working on, right? It could be data, it could be personalized learning, it could be student-centered instruction. The reason for that is typically because there needs to be some space at the leadership level to sort of like foster and help these initiatives and get over that plateau. And so some of that work is around strategic planning. Some of that work is around really aligning on being responsive to changing needs of the district. And most recently, I think a lot of that is centered around this idea of thinking about where there are opportunities to increase equity, right? And so when we're kicking off an equity experience, it's not about saying that it doesn't exist in the district. It's about finding, what already exists within the district in terms of creating equitable opportunities, and what is the right entry point to make more space for that, right? And so when Laura and Caroline really brought this to us, we were excited not only about what Millbrook's already accomplished and just sort of peeking at some of the strategic goals that you have as a district and as a board team. We feel like there's a really nice alignment between what we're hoping to do with this partnership and what you guys are setting out to do this school year. Dana, do you want to share anything about this slide?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Britt, and I'm calling in from Maryland. I'm a former ELA teacher and also former district leader in educational technology before joining Education Elements. And we're just so proud of the partnerships that we've been able to form with districts in New York. You can see here that we have partnered with over 30 school districts in New York. And as well across the country, we've been able to partner with over 200 districts and 1,000 schools. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary actually last week. And so in that time, as Gabby mentioned, not only thinking about our equity, but also strategic planning, all of the other pieces that make sure that a district is as successful as possible, from leadership development, professional development, all those pieces. So thank you for having us to share.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm so honored and humbled to be with you tonight to talk to you a little bit about our definition and how we arrived at this definition of educational equity. As a former superintendent, most recently about over a year ago, where I was sitting in the seats next to wonderful board members like you, trying to figure out how to address the needs of all of our kids. And I think if anything else that we've learned from this unfortunate pandemic that we currently sit in, and the generational pandemic that we have seen along unfortunate racial lines in so many ways, we've seen the inequities kind of come to forefront over the past few months. We've seen the highlights of the challenges that many of our kids face being in this digital space for the large part, but also just the challenges of getting our kids back to normalcy. And we came up with this definition in the middle of this because we saw this as not only an opportunity for change, but the moment to change. And so this definition recognizes that there are barriers that are experienced by marginalized students and that we have to deliberately spend some time and dedicate energy to ensure that those circumstances change. On the next slide, you will see how this definition leads into where all of you are sitting and how you're thinking about this work now. Before being a teacher, I was actually about 3 hours away from you getting my undergrad studies at Colgate University and had the opportunity to see what education could do. And then when I got into teaching, I saw just the opposite of how education was unfortunately not reaching all of our kids. And there was nothing disturbing that experience for kids, at least where I was in Miami-Dade County. But since then, we've had a lot of things change across our national landscape. And I think, again, this unfortunate pandemic has created the disturbance in which we can now create change, which you all are on the path of. So it's just more of a question of what kind of educational system do you want?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, we've had some conversations with Laura and with Caroline, and I see some familiar faces on here. I think I see Mike and Elliot and Brian. We've really enjoyed just our conversations with Millbrook and learning a lot about the region. Dana shared some of the partnerships we've had across the state and what we have learned about not only what you are facing as a district, but rather some of the, I guess, context and some of the regulations that are being passed down from the state level can sometimes feel unique to New York. And so wanted to take a look at some of your board goals for this year and see how that might align to what we're going to speak to you about today, which is this idea of an equity consortium. And there were 3 of your goals that really spoke to you, or spoke to us rather, that we thought were perfect matches to some of the phases that we're going to be walking you through, which would be our approach to this work. When you talked about this idea of learning, those of you that are on this call and you were a part of writing these goals, one of the biggest things that stuck out to me is I think there's always the bucketing of equity as being just about, race, bias, prejudice. But I think the idea is like really creating this culture of belonging and acceptance. And that is exactly sort of what you guys are working on in Millbrook and what you've already had some success with. And so I think there's a really nice complement to that, this idea of modeling this for everyone and making sure that that word all is actually realized. I see that word, come up a lot. The second piece is this idea of using data, right? Equity is not just about talking about difficult subjects. It's really about looking at our data and seeing, does that speak to our goals and what we're hoping to accomplish, right? I've recently heard an example of a district where their suspension rates went down, and that was a wonderful data point. But when they looked at that percentage of students that were still sitting in the suspension rate category, they realized the rates actually went up for one group of students, and it happened to be a group of male students at the middle school level, right? And so really digging into data and seeing not just is the overall data point going down, but what's actually behind that number. And I think that really is a nice complement to what you have here for your second goal in learning environment and technology, this idea of refining the use of data to not only inform instruction, but really guide some of your practices that you're putting into place as a district.
Hey,
And
Gabby.
this last one, yeah, Perry, go for it.
Yeah, I just a quick sort of clarification. So, I mean, to me, one of the areas that we have to focus on is equity, but with different slices. There's economic equity, and I don't mean like that we're going to try to fix the economic situation. It's just our students come from an incredibly diverse economic background. Same thing with language. I think that creates barriers for us in our district. So are you sort of looking at those other slices as well?
Yeah. And I'm glad you clarified that, Perry. That's something I know Dave's going to be sharing that with you. I work for Education Elements, obviously, so I'm a big fan of our approach, but I will say what I am the biggest fan of, whether or not this is my role, if you look at some of the partners out there that are doing work in this equitable space, right? It's sort of like, here's our approach and here is how you work towards equity, right? It's not about finding the right entry point. It's about sort of attacking everything that you could possibly think of in an equitable environment. And what I like about our process, and this was actually inspired by some of the conversations that we had with your superintendent, is we start with this inventory, right? We used to call it an audit, but we realized it really is about gathering as much information as we can about the district, including what those slices are. So not just assuming that we're talking about equity in terms of race or gender or whatever else, identifier you want to look at, but also thinking about overall, backgrounds, experiences, socioeconomic status. And that has come up in our conversations around Millbrook, that this is probably the slice that we want to be thinking about. But the purpose of that inventory is to actually get to know Millbrook even deeper and say, like, this is our recommendation for how we move forward. So I think that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought it up. So I appreciate that. And then I will say, just sort of aligned to that, this final goal that we pulled that we thought was a really nice complement to the work that we're doing is the idea of including the community. You're going to see, Dave's going to give you a deep dive into how we approach this work, but that is a big component of it. And sort of going back to what Perry just mentioned, it's not just saying we want to make sure we have an equal subsect of talking to this amount of students in this demographic, but it's really elevating voices that we might not have heard from before. And so, in doing this work with previous districts and focusing more on strategic visioning around it, we were like, there's a lot of young parents that don't quite have school-age children in this district, and we haven't talked to them yet. So let's even bring those voices to the table. So it's really thinking about what are those slices. I love that term, Perry. I might take that. But what are those slices of the community that we actually want to bring to the table and include in some of this information gathering? So I do want to give Dave a chance to sort of dive deeper into how we approach this, but are there any other questions? I thought Perry's was really great.
And I'm assuming this is a living, I mean, it's especially, and maybe I'm just, this is my focus, but I'm assuming a small district is a much bigger pain in the, butt to ensure equity, because every year the model can change dramatically. So I'm assuming this is a living document. This isn't a here, let's go through where Millbrook is right now. Oh, here's our plan for moving forward. We're done.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think Dana and Dave are laughing because this is what we preach about a lot, is this idea of responsiveness. You'll see that word come up over and over again. And it lives in a lot of our work, like equity, like strategic planning, where you're thinking about, big picture, long-term goals. The idea behind responsiveness is, data and information has a shelf life, right? So you can't plan for 5 years with a budget for this year, right? Because you don't know how the population is going to change. You don't know if there's going to be a pandemic that hits, right? And so this idea of responsiveness is like constantly taking in new information and using that to pivot, but not move away from what we are hoping that like long-term goal is. And so living is the perfect way to describe it. And I think you'll actually see that come up as we dive into some of the other methodology slides. All right, Dave, I'm going to share it with you, but I can keep driving unless you want it to take over the screen.
Perfect, perfect. So what you'll see on this slide is a lot what President Hartswick was getting at, is this notion of how do we know where to start and when do we know when to pivot and change? That starts with our ability to understand where you are. And that's our step 0, is understanding exactly the challenges that you are experiencing, the slices of the pie, if you will, of where kids are succeeding and where kids are not, and why those kids in different slices are not. And taking the time to deeply understand that, realizing that as a former superintendent of a relatively small district, we had one high school, 6,700 kids. Any given year, that number could shift 400 or 500 kids in one way or the other. And we have to rethink grade levels, like the number of teachers, and all of those pieces come into play. And so we realize the pace in which things sometimes change and the importance of constantly taking those snapshots to refocus our energy. And that's part of step 0. Once we understand a little bit more around step 0, we're able to then say back to the district, here's what we're seeing coming up. Here are the challenges, here are the opportunities, here are the strengths, here are the things that we can lean on and build momentum around. and then find ways to connect deeply to the problems. And in that sense is we're not going to connect to all of the problems at the same time. I think that's the misnomer of we're trying to solve and make everything a priority. Is anything actually a priority? So we spend some time really connecting to the most impactful and highest priority problem. And you'll see that in later slides. And then we include folks around the table to help us think about and solve that challenge by ensuring that the stakeholders at the table are the ones that are most deeply impacted. And those voices are the ones that are elevated and can help us find solutions and provide additional perspective to the outcomes we want to achieve within your district. And then ultimately create prototypes and redesign systems that will create the equity that we want to see in those slices of pie. And at the end, which I think is probably the most important step, is the idea of going from the actual creation of redesign ideas to implementing them. As a former superintendent, I can tell you firsthand that there were many a times we had a lot of great ideas. And those great ideas ended up on paper versus in classrooms versus across the district. And this is the step that we push really hard to ensure that what you all create and what we're able to support you on actually comes into play. And it will look similar to this. Now, this is just a sample scope of work, so you can see how it kind of works out over time. But we spend some time in this inventory audit stage to really understand everyone at a deep level, from leaders to schools to districts and systems, so that we have a full picture of how to approach that connect phase and deeply prioritize the conversations around the things that kind of were flagged, identified in the inventory process, so that we can go connect to the problem, include the right people at the table so that we can understand how the system is playing out, and then ultimately create and then go to action. But I want to walk you all through what that could look like from an inventory standpoint. So if you can imagine, here on the left, you'll see a bunch of different systems, practices, protocols that may have information about those slices of the pie, if you will, that show different numbers. And we probably have all seen those numbers at different times. But there might be a chance that, we look at those numbers to see that there's a problem, but we haven't actually attached to where or found where the problem might lie. And so through this process, we're able to organize the challenges and potentially the opportunities so that you can see from 1 to 6, and again, this is just a hypothetical example, 1 to 6, here are the priorities in which we want to dive deeper in. So if academics happens to be number 1, we will look at that and look at the slice of the pies. Who is succeeding? Who may not be succeeding? It could be along social economic lines. It could be on, grade bands, whatever it might be. We want to get underneath that so you all can have an opportunity to really see where the problem lies or the opportunities to change. And from that inventory, we're able to then say, okay, we're going to connect to this teacher hiring piece. We realize actually that is our number 1 issue. How do we actually find a way to get to a better way of leading that process? How do we identify the way that we want to interview, recruit, market, all of the pieces that go into the hiring process, and then prioritize whatever that problem might be? What is it that we need to focus on? And so we'll focus our energy there. And to the point though, even though we're focusing our energy on this particular challenge, if this has happened to be the challenge for you all, we also want to recognize there are other challenges that are up next, and that we have to have a list and a strategy to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the district. And from there, we're able to then communicate outwardly to, here's how we're going to approach this. This is what the core of the inequity is. And now we're able to now go from connecting and identifying the problem to moving to the include phase. And if we identify in the include phase that teacher hiring is the issue, we want to make sure people around the table touch teacher hiring at different points. It could be a teacher who has just gone through the interview process or the hiring process to a veteran that has been in the district for 30 years, or a community member who has had great experiences with teachers. So again, it varies by community. And I think that's what separates us a little bit. A lot of other folks out there right now go into this work and say, you know what? You have to have these 5 positions at the table for every problem. And that's not always the best solution, because there could be other people that could inform how to restructure and rethink the process. And from this include table, they're creating potential opportunities or solutions for improvement. And you'll see on the far right-hand side, those 3 pieces that are coming up here are just examples, but that group may come up with something different through our facilitation and through our guidance to get you to a place of identifying equitable redesign opportunities. And we'll take those solutions or potential solutions and then test them. see if they actually work before putting them into play. Spend significant amount of time to deeply understand what they could be and create prototypes that we believe will be the solution for a lot of the inequities that we saw earlier. But before you roll it out, and before you roll out any big initiative, I'm sure you all do this already, you want to know what you're getting into before it becomes official. And so spending time creating, but then also spending time understanding and redesigning the process and iterating and being responsive is going to be key. And so at that point, you will have a finalized prototype from this stage and saying, after we tested and pushed and prodded on it a little bit, we realized number 2 intake was the prototype that we want to push forward. From that step, we actually would spend time making sure as you implement that part, that when you get to the action phase, that it is supported in a way that allows for you to get the results that you want to see, that you're able to sustain the action and ultimately push towards outcomes once we leave, right? I've been in that seat where we're kind of left with this plan, maybe a couple of meetings and saying like, this is what you should do. But we actually go a little bit further to extend our support to ensure that it's implemented with the fidelity you want to see and push towards the outcomes that ultimately your kids deserve. And at the end of the day, this is an example scenario that may play out. In this example, Gabby kind of alluded to something where, there might be an audit or an inventory where we're looking at suspension numbers. And these are a couple of the things that are coming out of this situation. And from those findings, we are then able to connect to the problem more deeply and then ultimately include the right people at the table. And you'll notice the people that are included at the table may not always be the first people or the first names you might think of, but are the ones that could potentially get you to the right solutions. And so I think it is important to know that inventory will help yield not only the problem, but the people that probably should sit at the table to support you in this effort to changing what you see as the inequities within the district, and then creating the prototypes and ultimately creating action. So as you go through this process, you might have some ideas in the audit or inventory phase of what the challenges might be, but at the end of the day, you might be surprised the action that you actually have to take by going through this process of really looking at it through an equity lens.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
So how do you include when you're developing this inventory, how do you ensure that you're getting a proper cross view of, especially from a parent and student standpoint, it's not just about getting a group of 10 parents or 20 parents or whatever. It's getting the right parents. So if you've got ESL students that are struggling when they first join, come into the first 2 or 3 years, and they never catch up. How do you make sure that the parents are, I don't want to say afraid, not afraid, but just they actually feel confident enough to speak about the things that are in the way, or what they feel is in the way of their students or their children?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a couple of different ways that we look to get the inclusion of the voices of families that are the most impacted. And we call it designing intentionally for the margin. So as we come out of that inventory and identify and see that maybe your ESL students are struggling, we'll say, okay, how do we and who do we need to get in touch with to get a better understanding of what the lived experience is? And that may mean finding parents of kids within the district and where the numbers are the most disparate, and finding those parents who are willing to commit. Maybe it's in person, maybe it's through Zoom or whatever that approach may be, but not stopping there. Finding a way to also potentially provide them a survey or another avenue to connect and provide their input. And because I find that, and we have found over time, is that there's no one and singular way to get to parents and families in particular, and that we have to be nimble enough to figure out how to reach them and not stop until we get those folks that we need. And so it is a rather labor intensive process, but one that yields the folks that you want around the table, whether it's literally around the table or the voices that are brought in through surveys or otherwise.
And when you do this analysis, today, and I mean, I do mean today, our biggest, I think one of our biggest problems is really around the inequity of ability for our remote students when they're, they have the hybrid model, but there's some students that have parents that or babysitters or whatever, however, daycare people that really know how to use systems and know how to help them submit work and find work. And then there's students on the other end that have a terrible time even getting on. And it's one of the things that I think is driving, just sort of in a very small time capsule here, of as long as we're in this COVID mode, there's going to be inequity driven by not just the students, not just what the teachers can do, but what the parents are capable of. Or it probably doesn't sound right, but more about, how good are they at using the school infrastructure? I mean, when you switch back to everybody's in 5 days a week, then you can focus more on, what type of teacher, what type of material, what responses. But right now, so do you plan to focus on the right now, or, hopefully the right now when we return to normal?
Right. It's a great question. And I think that's the beauty of the inventory, because it will give us a little bit of both. It will say, here's the clear and present danger that you need to or will want to address right away, while also identifying something that could be longer term. There's like, here's a scenario that right now will show up in kind of the COVID education world, but also will show up in the in-person world that you need to track or pay attention to, or we'll have to find some time and energy for. But we'll recognize all of the challenges, but most importantly, present them back to the district to have this discourse that you're hitting on right now, to identify biggest priority, biggest impact, and the most urgent. And I think the combination of those three will probably yield what you're speaking to, whether it's ESL population or the identification of the digital divide and who it's impacting the most. All of those pieces will come out of this inventory. All great questions. And it's actually super refreshing. I was on a call earlier today, and the depth of questions that you're asking are tenfold stronger and better and more intentional, which says how committed you are to this work, versus, not to say any slight against that district, but I don't think they're ready and understand the depth of how to really dig into the challenge and get to the root of the problem. So I commend you for that. And with that said, I'll stop there for any additional questions before turning it back over.
And it's just some logistics. Like, are we talking a 6-month process? Are we talking, 5 years? What are we looking at from the getting a first set of goals in place?
Sure.
Yeah, I could take a stab at that. So what you're seeing on the screen is really the proposed timeline that we've shared with your superintendent. And the idea is, this is actually not a very aggressive timeline, and that was very intentional. We don't want to assume that we know what is necessary for Millbrook. We really want that inventory to drive that work. But we also want to honor that there are other districts within the Dutchess region that are looking to form a consortium around this work, and there's a lot of power in that. It not only builds capacity in the region, you have sort of counterparts in other districts that you can speak to. It also, there's some touch points that are going to be directly with the district, because that is what Millbrook needs, and that's what some other districts needs. And then there are going to be other touch points where you're going to be able to have your team members collaborate with other people as well. And so this timeline was built with that in mind, with not only what Millbrook is looking for, but also what other districts who are kicking off this consortium work with us are looking for as well. And so I'll talk through it. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna be more transparent and say this is probably gonna shift one more time, because this was built with potentially starting this work a little bit earlier than January. And so you might see like slight shifts in the month. But in general, we would spend about 4, 6, 8 weeks in what we're calling this inventory phase, which Dave was talking about. And this is where we're looking at all of those different systems and areas that, you would sort of help us identify. We would give you some recommendations, but you could actually pick, these are the ones that I think, we need to dig into deeper. From that inventory phase, we would spend about the next 3 months in the second phase, which is connect. And I won't dive too deeply into it because I know Dave just did that. But this is really the first round where we're starting to engage with your community, and that's going to bring us, almost towards the end of this academic year. We're going to imagine there's a lot of other things happening in the world, like external things that are happening that potentially will affect Millbrook as well. This is right around testing season. There's a potential where this is right around another transition if hybrid learning continues past January. And so we built that with that in mind as well. And then what we're hoping to end this first, academic year with is including those voices at the table. We're hoping we've identified from the inventory. These are the problems that we want to dig into. We've said these are probably the areas that we want to look at within that problem. And these are the people that could help us ask the right questions and get the right information. So by the end of this academic year, middle of the summer, you would have a lot of community input. And then we're hoping to kick off next school year where we start creating those prototypes that Dave was sharing, and we start testing them out, getting some real-time feedback. And by the end of this calendar year, you have an action plan and you're saying, this is something that we want to spread out and scale out district-wide in Millbrook. So this is a proposed timeline. There is room for shifting, but in general, you asked about how long this is going to take. This is about, 1 calendar year right now. One other thing I'll name on this slide is you're going to notice at the bottom, this is sort of hidden, but there's also going to be some consortium leadership sessions. One of the greatest, pieces of feedback we can get as outside partners is building capacity in a district where they don't need us for that work anymore, but they still want to partner with us on something else. And so this is actually something that we added after talking to some area superintendents, after talking to Laura. And it's this idea that in addition to doing all of this work within the region of Millbrook, we also want to build capacity with your leaders to do this work as well. So that, the process or the focus might shift year to year. Like you said, this, the same data isn't going to be relevant a few years from now, but the process itself is something that can be replicable. It's better in the long term for the district, right? Because you can start building capacity for work like this in-house as well. And it also gives your leaders and whoever is identified to be on that team, it could be teacher leaders as well. It gives them a chance to work with some counterparts in other areas as well.
And the consortium, is that mostly, I'll call it like schools, same size, same, makeup, same issues, or is it, basically 4 ends of the spectrum?
No, that's actually sort of the nice thing about the districts that are opting into this right now and have reached out and they want to do this work. We actually did pull the NICEA database, our research out, and we put the districts side by side, and they're almost mirror images in terms of population size, the split of the demographics, even the socioeconomic status split. And then you also have just some very similar priorities that we're noticing in the conversations that we're having. So we've had some conversations with the superintendents together to make sure that the fit felt right and we weren't forcing a consortium where it didn't need to happen. And we feel really, really good about Millbrook, wanting to be a part of this, but 2, the other districts that'll be supporting as well. All right, we have one more slide. I know we've been sharing a lot of information. This is something that I won't go into too much, but I think, for the board, this is something that you probably have to speak to as well. What would even be the purpose of doing this work? What are we going to be able to say is true at the end of this first year? And so we think these 3 things are definitely going to be true for you. And so wanted to just share this with you and see if there are any other questions that you have. I'll stop sharing my screen in a second so that we can see everybody's faces, but I'll give you a chance to read through it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so we can hear if you have any questions, but if there's anything you want to look back at, this is something we will send on to Laura and Caroline, and it's your copy to keep if you need it for anything. And Cheryl or Laura, let me know if I should make one of you a host, because I know I have all the host privileges now.
Could I ask, how do we get this to last past 3 years at a time? You have different people rotating in and out of the district. So there's an awareness, you're building something, there's awareness, there's implementation, people get it, but new people come and go. So how do you feel the culture will just, the culture will be changed somewhat, that people will understand it from that, or I'll let you answer the question for
It's
ideas.
a great question, a fantastic question. I think there's three components of sustainability that make the shifts that surround equity work important. One of which is at the core of the work that is happening, the strategic plan aligns to creating a more equitable vision for the short and long term. So the strategic plan is the thread. In addition to, while building and leaning on that strategic plan and implementing the things that are attached to it that will have more of an equity lens as you get deeper and deeper into this work, is aligning policy. And the policy that drives day-to-day decisions, drives district decisions, will start to shift and reflect over time what you want to see. For example, I can point to Portland Public Schools out west, who adopted their own equity-driven set of policies and procedures that are now board policy. And it shifts the way that the culture, to your point, the culture operates, because policy is now aligned to that. So I think the combination of strategic plan, policy will ultimately impact culture in the long run.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing, John. When we originally started like brainstorming what the right approach for the consortium would be, the idea would be we would have a group of Millbrook leaders that would be the project team for this year. And so they would go through all the sessions with us, the Connect, Include, Create. And there's a potential for us to bring in another round of a project team in the next year, right? Like, let's say you're like, this work's been really wonderful. We've loved the process. And with all of the shifts that have happened, in a post-COVID world, or because there's demographic shifts or just redistricting happening, whatever that is, there's a potential that there is a new challenge that you want to dig into. So you might say, can you guys inventory this next? And so I think our hope was, even if it's not the full process, those leadership sessions that I shared, those 4, there's a potential to have like a wave 2 of leaders that go through that, a wave 3 of leaders. And so the hope is that starts scaling out as well. The other thing that we have been chatting with districts about, including Millbrook, is if you are at, 2020 is kind of the year that a lot of strategic plans have sunsetted. And so a lot of districts are thinking about what their next 3 or 5 year strategic plan is going to be. And so there's some districts that have wanted to do this equity work and strategic planning work hand in hand. And what I like about sort of what the potential for Millbrook is we could do this equity work, and then you have that inventory data to use whenever you start thinking about new strategic priorities. And so you can build that into your upcoming strategic plan as well. And so that, will help with the longevity too.
And how do we tie this into probably the most important sort of piece, which is our financial plan? If we need to drive a different level of teacher, or if pre-first is the way we can instill some equity in our ESL community. I'm just making them up. All of those things need money. Not just the money to pay for the plan, but the money to actually implement it. How do we, have you guys worked directly with people like Brian to do the long-term, a 5-year financial outlook to say, in a year, we're going to need to do this, 2 years, we're going to need to do that?
I can speak to a little bit of that, and probably not as satisfying of an answer. But one, yes, we do identify those financial barriers and/or challenges, however, not to the depth of a financial forecast for 5 years, but able to identify within the inventory and through the conversations around connecting to the depth of the problem, being able to say that this is rising as an equity that needs funding. And so being able to name up front, we need stronger or more ESL teachers at earlier grades. Great, identify that. what's the cost behind that in the short term and the long term? People stay and cost more than programs. And so how do we fund that over time? And so we deeply provide that insight, provide the recommendations and direction you can go, but also recognize at the same point, the pie, unfortunately, especially in a post-COVID world, is not going to grow exponentially. If in many ways it might shrink, right? And that's probably what you're experiencing, and budget season is coming. So I understand that these conversations are very real. So then we would have this conversation around if there's additional allocation of funds needed to go along the thread of ESL teaching, support of the program, whatever it might be. Where is it where maybe the return on your investment in other programs didn't yield what you want? And so that we can say, here's an opportunity to shift funds in a different way. Because a lot of it is a shell game in some ways of like taking a little bit of money here to put it here versus finding new allocations and resources. So we do spend some time as we get to the depth of the problem to understand and provide that insight. I think you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Dave, we don't like to call it a shell game.
It's my old hat as a superintendent. The changes we had to make. Unfortunately, it was that for us at times. Unfortunately.
Just kidding.
What other questions do you have?
So what's next? Caroline, Laura?
Begin the work. We set up our teams. There are layers of teams. I don't know if you want to talk about the structure of the teams.
I'm just curious as to how. I'm really concerned that we're still going to be leaving out a portion of our population just because it's difficult to engage. If you're working two jobs, or if you're struggling with the language, or whatever the reasoning is, my biggest worry with any work like this is that you're going to miss, constituents.
I think that's a valuable question. And I think the questions you just raised are the exact ones we would want to replicate and answer, right? So let's look at the problem and say, the subset or the slice that we identified is challenging to reach. Why are they challenging to reach? Multiple jobs, language barrier, like name all of the roadblocks that get in the way. And it's our job to help find those solutions to overcome those roadblocks so that we can get to those individuals. Now, I'm not saying it's easy or profess that it's always clean and easy and can be done in a very quick and efficient way, but that's part of the inventory. It's part of the connecting to the problem, is that we have to ask those tough questions so we can find those solutions. But definitely hear you. It's real. Completely understand. I think you might be muted. I'm sorry.
Any other questions for the team? All right.
Great.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate the time and the effort put into presenting this. Very good.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited to be partnering with you. You bring a freshness and a progressiveness to the work, and so we're excited about moving forward with you. Thank you for being here this evening.
We really appreciate it. Thank you guys for having us.
So
All right.
now,
So
now we have Caroline, who's going to talk about the hybrid remote update, reflections of learning models, which is a nice coupling to the presentation that we just heard. The principals and Elliot, I believe Caroline was part of creating a survey to gain some insight to how parents and students in grades 6 through 12 are feeling about their learning experience now, whether they're in person, hybrid, or remote. And so Caroline's going to share the findings from that survey and give some more context around it as well.
Laura, are we specifically dividing it into 6 through 12 and K through 5?
No, we just sent out surveys for students in grades 6 through 12 to give us feedback, thinking that maybe the elementary weren't able to sort of give us, they could work with their parents in giving accurate feedback using the survey, if that makes sense. So we
Yeah, no, I got it. I mean, I was more thinking do you send that kind of survey, but to the parents of the K-5? But anyway, didn't mean
Just
that.
to the parents. Yep.
Okay.
You're on, Caroline.
So Elliot will actually be sharing.
Great.
Thank you. So I know at one of the more recent board meetings, the board was interested to know, number one, where our students were learning, in what learning model, and then also some feedback as to what the experience has been thus far. So prior to the Thanksgiving break, we collected some of the data. So this presentation will just go through some of that information. So where are our Blazers learning? This is the most up-to-date information, unfortunately, because of the COVID numbers rising in our area. Some of these numbers are moving towards fully remote, and that's a consistent trend that continues. But currently we have on A days, which is Monday and Tuesday, 244 students district-wide. On B days, we have 253 students district-wide, and AB days, either 4 days a week or 5 days a week, we have 68 students district-wide. Though we are allowing for the 5 days a week for our students with disabilities or students who are English language learners, our most vulnerable population, some of those students are opting for only 4 days a week. They are not opting to come in on Wednesdays. They don't want to be different than their peers, so they are opting not to come in on Wednesdays and to remain remote. We have 272 students who have chosen to be fully remote. That is our C group. So that is where our district's students are currently being educated right now. Elliot, next. So we did send out a survey prior to Thanksgiving, and this is some of the information that we were able to obtain. So we sent out a Likert scale and some statements, and 1 was the lowest and 5 was the highest. So these are the average responses from each of the levels. And from the group of remote families and daily families and then hybrid families, this was the average response from Elm, Alden, middle school, and high. That's how I arranged the information. We had 321 responses, so that's about a 38% or so response rate. So as you can see in the response to the child being able to complete all the assignments given in a timely fashion, most of the responses averaged about a 4% or like a 4. The outlier being those students who are attending daily. As a reminder, those students who attend daily are students with disabilities or students who are identified as English language learners who may have difficulty completing their assignments in a timely fashion anyway, and that may be attributable to their status as an English language learner or as a student with a disability. So it may not be surprising or atypical that they may struggle with that to begin with. So not necessarily surprising that those numbers might be the lowest in terms of this response.
Caroline, I just had a quick question for you. Does the 85% of, it's 85% between remote and hybrid don't have an issue with assignments giving in handing in assignments in a timely fashion? Does that line up to what the teachers and the principals are saying as far as that's the case? My fear is only you're getting a parent's perspective, and sometimes that could be a little different from a student's perspective.
So that's interesting. And we can hear maybe from the principals on that. So this is the response from the surveys from the families. And if the principals want to speak, I can speak to the elementary because we haven't unpacked some of that data. I know one of the things that we've spoken about down at Elm Drive is that while we were panicked about some of the students' reading assessments and very concerned about that, there weren't actually as many students as we had anticipated, significantly below with their reading scores as we were anticipating. So that is one thing I can speak to. But Steve, do you want to talk about that? Students turning in their work. Is it true?
Yeah, so the one thing I wanted to speak to was that especially at the secondary level, along with the parent survey that you're seeing the data for, we also did a survey with our students. So when you look at that data next to each other, it was all very close. I don't want to speak to an exact percentage. So when you look at the relative, percent differential of what the parents believe to what the students believe, it was very, very close in nearly every single category. Truth be told, the only category that we saw a discrepancy was about the feeling of hybrid learning and remote learning. Parents' feelings were much lower than students' feelings on how they felt about hybrid learning and remote learning in general. And listen, I'm not going to attribute that to anything. I think for parents, this is really difficult. I know for me as a parent, it's really hard to watch my child have to do a form of education that is not one that I am accustomed to as a professional or as a student formerly myself. So I do think that's a big reason that was the one area that we did see a big discrepancy in the data between students and families. I think from our end, from the teaching perspective, it's really complicated because it's very student driven. Student to student is very different. But I do think it correlates primarily to the information we saw from our students and our families. And then the last thing I just want to say too is that all along, while we have been doing these kind of, I guess you would call them quarterly assessments with our parents as well as our students, we have been doing like bi-weekly check-ins with our students as well at the secondary level to check in with them and see how they're doing. And that's been really good, not just from an academic standpoint, but it's been really important in the social emotional component for our students. From those surveys, I can speak definitely to what I'm doing at the middle school, and I can definitely say that I'm sure Rick is doing similar. But we often see in some of the free response areas commentary from certain students that's showing that they're struggling and that they're having difficulties. And so that's been a way for our guidance counselors, our psychologists, or even myself to reach out with students and make those connections and figure out what's going on and how we can be of support. On a separate note, I think our students are also oftentimes looking for engagement. So I know one thing I was doing throughout last year and into this year was whenever I saw a student, I was trying anytime a student really took the time out to answer the free response questions in great detail to make sure that I was sending an individual email back to those students to let them know they're heard and that we're hearing their feedback and that it matters and that it does change and alter everything we do, not only at the middle school level, but truly when we sit in these district level meetings and present things like this to the board, that, a student's individual feedback does change what we do day in and day out. So the data correlates, and then the day-to-day operations with the students is also right there as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve, what's the percentage of the parents? What are the percentage of, I guess, the students and/or parents that returned the questionnaires you sent out?
So that definitely differs from building to building. I want to say, and I'm really speaking off my cuff here, but I want to say we got somewhere in the range of 30%. It depends on this particular one, but I want to say that we've gotten a higher percentage on the week-to-week student feedback forms, and it's actually been kind of hit or miss on those. Sometimes we have a higher percentage than others.
So we're only getting a 30% or a 38%, as Caroline said, snapshot of people that returned. So, the people that I guess are more happy or returning, and we're not hearing from the rest of the group whether they're happy or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, 30% 30% is 30%. It's only, less than 1/3 of what we're seeing, but I would anticipate that a third's a pretty big number, So I would anticipate we would see a lot more of the same. And like I said, I think when I've, at least the crunching I've done of the information, and again, not just the data of the linear scales or these, these scales of numbers, but even when you look at the information given, it really is a really good cross section. So I say that because many of the information that we read is super positive, and we hear really, really great things about all the things that are going great. We hear some information that's really negative, and hey, I'm struggling with this or this or this. And then we hear a lot, and the majority of it that is in the middle. So, I tend to believe that the third kind of feels really good about that. But again, I'm kind of throwing that off the top of my head. I'm not sure exactly what that number was exactly.
Yeah, I hope your belief is right. Thank you.
Steve, my question was more of, and that's good information to know as far as the students and the parents, more of the teachers. I mean, the teachers would know if 85% of all the assignments given weekly are handed in a timely fashion. I was just curious from that level, if the teachers would say, yeah, about 85% of my class hands in everything on time. That was more of the question that I had, but.
Elliot, the next slide, please. My child has been able to prioritize, plan, and manage their workload. So this is pretty consistent across all of the levels, with some outliers being just a little bit higher or a little bit lower. And again, the students who are daily at Elm Drive being a little bit of the lowest. They're brand new to school in some cases, being kindergartners, and I think this is altogether just very difficult for them. Imagine this being the only experience that you've had in school. Even if you're in first grade, you're just really becoming a student last year, and then the pandemic hits. So, and if you're a kindergartner, you're learning how to become a student with a lot of interruptions in routine. So that's very challenging, but otherwise fairly consistent in that 3.8, 3.9 scenario. And in the high school, those students have a lot of experience being students, and fairly consistent with that remote or hybrid number being 4.1. The students in daily attendance at the high school, there were no responses from that group. In terms of the work that the child being assigned has had them use their skills in that subject area and the strategies related, that was consistent in the high 3s, and that was across all of the learning models for all of the grade levels. My child has been able to get feedback, which if you look at the learning research from John Hattie, which is an educational theorist who talks about effective means of helping students learn, feedback is one of the most important things that teachers can do for students. So this is a really high number. That was something that I was really happy to see, because feedback is actually something that's extremely important when you are talking about what are the actions that teachers can engage in with students to be able to help them be successful. Feedback is extremely important. So it's really good to see this number be high in the 4s. So that was good. My child has had access to all of their teachers' Google Meets for direct instruction. Again, this number is consistently in the 4s. My child didn't understand something, they regularly were able to get support. Very consistent with the 4.4 number almost across the board. A couple of outliers there for the daily instruction, which is a little bit surprising because those students are in person with their teachers. So I thought that was interesting. But again, those students are in there with their teacher. So that parent might not be observing them getting support. They may not see what that support looks like in the school building. So I thought that was interesting that at home they're able to get support, and in school they certainly are getting support as well.
Caroline, have we ever done this, before? And I know you wouldn't have the 3 modes, but have we ever asked these kind of questions prior to COVID? I mean, I'd be interested to see, when the students were in 5 days a week and there was no COVID and everything was normal, what these numbers would be.
Yeah, we don't have a baseline for this. We do have surveys from last year during COVID, just about that. And we actually use some of those questions to adapt some of these statements for the Likert scale that we used. So some of this is adapted from the survey that we did last year about our remote learning.
Okay.
And has your child experienced any technical issues?
So in this one, the higher number would be the better, the worse the higher it is, the worse it is.
Correct. How do you feel about distance learning? So this is interesting because, I mean, how do they feel about it? It's kind of an interesting thing. They're hybrid, right? So I guess we probably could have dug some deeper. They've chosen distance learning in some cases, they're remote families. So, I'm not sure what aspect do they feel. We probably could have asked some more questions here, dug a little bit deeper, but the 3.1 is indicative of something. And yet the remote families have chosen to remain in distance learning throughout this portion of the school year. So the daily folks, the lower number of the 2.5, 2.9, 3.2, they're here every day. And many of them will reflect that, their students struggle and that they really would not want them in a distance learning model. And that's why they're sending them every day. So it's not surprising that they have the lower numbers.
Caroline, I think it's safe to say that really the parents that choose the remote aren't really, that's not what they want. So I don't think this is a direct reflection on the school. Just speaking from experience, I wish my kids were in school every day. So I don't think that's a direct reflection. I think everyone would prefer their kids be in school 5 days a week. So that's not too surprising.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Chris. I mean, it sounds like this is almost more about how do you feel about life in general right now. At school, you go in and the next thing you know, you've got a stomach ache or you sneeze and you're out. There's so many aspects that to me could be rolled under distance learning, where it's not just talking about, how you're interacting with the teachers and your assignments and those things. It's, how do you like going in on a Monday and getting kicked out on Tuesday, that kind of stuff.
Right. So that was my exact point, was that we could have asked more questions here, because how do you feel about distance learning at this time? The numbers are low, and yet the remote families chose that. So, we don't have a lot of reasons why. So that was my exact point. They've chosen it, and yet it's low. So we don't know why the numbers are low, just with this one question. So it's not giving us a lot of details. And yet, the numbers are a little bit lower for the daily in-person folks. And that makes sense to me, because they're sending their students because their students struggle and they wouldn't prefer for them to be home. So I get that. That makes total sense to me. But the fact that the hybrid and the remote folks both are low, we don't really have a whole lot of detail as to is there something particular about the distance model? I understand it's not preferable for anybody, but is, there's something particular feedback that we could get that we may be able to make better of a bad situation if we had more details.
And Caroline, if I can just jump in for clarification for everybody as well, as a matter of trying to get down and dig deeper with that, when we did take this survey information, we did have obviously these linear scales. How did you feel about distance? How did you feel remote? But then those were followed up with an open-ended question of, do you have any constructive feedback regarding distance learning as well as hybrid learning? And so through there, I think we got a little bit more of detailed responses from folks about things that were going well, things that weren't going so well, and then other things that we could look at as areas to improve.
Steve, can you share with us some of that feedback?
Yeah, that's coming.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Caroline. Sorry, jump ahead.
And then how do you feel about hybrid learning at this time? So this tends to be a little bit more of an even spread. And then some of the comments, and this is, I just tried to pick out themes from the comments. There was a lot of gratitude towards our teachers and staff for the effort in juggling online and in-person education at the same time. Recommendations for online only teacher at the elementary level specifically. If numbers were to allow for one section of teacher to be able to teach the online students, while in-person students could be separate with other teachers, that would be preferable, because I think what was seen in the comments was that teachers have really stepped up from last year in terms of the remote learning. It was much improved from last year, but that remote with the in-person students, the hybrid model, is really challenging for everyone. So that if there were a possibility of sort of making them pure again, remote and in-person, that would be preferable. And then requests for additional in-person learning if that were to become possible. There were concerns for the mental health and isolation with the limited in-person instruction. That was something that came up, especially with the adolescent parents. There were remote instruction improved since last year. That came up several times as well. And then a lot of praise for our teachers that they are doing the best they can in very impossible circumstances. So those were sort of the themes. And a lot of just concern for our struggling students who are having a difficulty engaging remotely. And then looking ahead, we did another survey. This was just this past week. And then this asked, for the third quarter, will your child be attending in person? And this is the percentages. 75% said yes. 25% said no, my child will remain full-time remote.
The opposite, actually.
Hey, Caroline, what is it right now? What is the difference between then and now? Like the first 2 quarters till, what's the difference?
I don't have the percentage. 272 out of 873.
It ranges from like 30 to 40% between the schools.
It's about 31% in total.
Caroline, is that with 100% participation or on this one, or is it the same percentage as the previous slides?
No, this is no. So we don't have 100% participation as of yet with our this survey, but we are working on making phone calls to try and get feedback from everyone. I think people are reluctant to commit just yet. I think they'd like to wait until closer to make that decision because they'd like to see the trends and numbers after the holidays.
Right.
You also you can go from the 75% to the 25, but you can't come back, right?
Correct.
If I'm a parent and I say I'm going to have my child do remote, that's where my child is, versus if I say that they're going to be hybrid, and then I don't like the way things go, I can just switch them to remote. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 694 responses thus far, but some of them actually have been duplicates. And that might be user error, or it might be people who have changed their mind. So we have to filter some of that out as well. And then we have to figure out if they are duplicates and not the same answer, which do they mean actually? And then possibilities for growth in some cases, if a lot of families were to choose remote instruction and there were sufficient space, would you want your child to attend in person every day during the third quarter? So 63% of folks said yes and 36 said no.
Caroline, do we know how realistic that is? I mean, using the numbers we have today, would it be possible to have 5 days with busing and everything else? I'm just curious of how much of a slide you'd have to take in order to allow 5 days. It seems like it could be a lot.
Right. So it's going to depend where those students are. You know, are they distributed evenly? Like, it's going to depend on a lot of things, because we don't know as of right now where those students are. And that's why we're going to use those 3 days prior to Christmas or the holiday break to be able to look at those numbers more specifically, to be able to answer those questions.
We also have to find an additional, I'm trying to remember the numbers in my head, but somewhere around an additional $800,000 to $1 million. Well, it would be half a year, so it would probably be about half of that. But we still would need to find, because I'm assuming that all the original requests for additional personnel stay in place. Right, if we went back 5.2, or one of those other models, those were significantly more expensive than the AABB day model.
And if Wednesdays became available for in-person instruction, would you like to take advantage of this opportunity? 66% said yes, and 33% said no.
What does that mean, Caroline? Does that mean like everybody comes in on Wednesday?
Correct. And that, again, that would be if there were availability for additional days, because many people wanted to keep their students home. If a significant number chose remote and there were additional opportunities for a child to come in, we just wanted to get numbers as, like I said earlier, as the COVID numbers have risen in the area, many folks have chosen remote. So as we were seeing numbers go down, if it became true that we had space in the buildings rather than keep empty buildings open, we would want to bring more students in. And then if your child would be attending in person, would they need transportation? So to answer the transportation question, 46% said yes, and 53% said, well, almost 54% said no.
But again, the tricky thing with that number is we can't rely on it, because that 53% can go to 0 and we'd have to supply buses for them, right?
That's correct. And then this is our lunch numbers. The blue is the request for meal delivery at home. Red is meals during school days for instruction. Yellow is both, and green is neither. And then next steps. So on the December 21st through 23rd, the administration will analyze all of the data that we have from these surveys. In the meanwhile, we'll attempt to get answers from each family, or at least as up-to-date, accurate information as we can. We'll assess all the other possible models for in-person instruction based on the feedback that we have. We'll report to Laura after the holidays, and then she will be able to give the most up-to-date information to the board, and then we will communicate whatever information that we have to the community as to what is available. And that is the information that we have for you.
Any questions? Yeah, I'm not sure how to take some of it. I mean, on one hand, I agree with Howard, 30% is kind of, does that really give us a flavor? But, in the past, if parents were angry about something, they would have, answered the survey and would have answered it, no, I don't like this and it's not working. So I don't know. I mean, I hope it's positive, but I don't know really how to take that. But it's it's definitely good to see that they're, they're on board with it and they feel like their kids are getting education out of it. And again, I don't know who, maybe it was Chris. I really would like to hear, and it doesn't have to be a survey and all that. Just what are the teachers seeing? Do they feel like the majority of the kids are getting their work in on time or they're doing it? One of the disturbing things somebody sent, it was in the NYSBA paper, was this whole kids are just leaving. I mean, they're not going to school. It would be interesting to see, hopefully we have a good picture of which kids are struggling and, with whether it's technology or attention or whatever the reasoning. It would be good to hear from, sort of again, I hate to ask the teachers to do a survey when they've got so much other stuff to do, but, just to get their feedback, Caroline, or through the principals, get Elm and Alden and middle school and, are the teachers happy with what they're getting out of their students? Anyway, any other questions, comments for Caroline? Nice piece of work. Anything? Okay, thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Leadership reports, discussion, superintendent review process. Yeah, so the next item is, Laura's been here since January of last year, first as the interim and second as the actual superintendent. January is basically the mid-year review or the full year review, however you want to look at it. But I think we need to treat it as mid-year, since, by the end of the year, that's when you want to get on this cycle. So I wanted to get feedback. I sent you guys, the board members, a copy of the template that's been used in the past. I do know there's some tools out there that instead of having to manually go pull everybody's comments and everybody's numbers into a spreadsheet, there's tools out there that can be used to do it. Or we can just do it in Google Sheets or something like that. So I wanted to have this discussion because I would really, by the end of January, we owe this feedback to Laura. So comments?
Harry, I agree. I mean, I think we should, we all talked about this in the past. I think I think it's only helpful. I think it would be great. I think it's just a step forward.
Yeah. Do we have, John, I know in the past we've talked about using a program to do it. Have we, do you know of those? I mean, are those still around? Or, anybody else that's on the board have any, or Laura, I mean, this could be a tool that's used by the administration to, review itself, sort of review itself.
I know there's super eval, and that you can upload various rubrics for assessment. It can be a board self-reflective assessment. It could be a soup assessment as well as assistant soups. And you can customize it to reflect what the district wants to use as tools for evaluation. But that comes with a cost.
No, any idea what that, are we talking a couple $100, or are we talking a couple $100,000?
I can find out for you if you like.
No, it's not billions.
Perry, also, New York State School Board Association has an evaluation tool that might be worth looking at. We don't have a lot of time, but might be, less expensive possibly, but I know they have something on that as well.
And so does NISCUS. They have a pretty extensive rubric as well. I can pull those for you if you'd like and share them.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because what I'd like to do is have, when we come back in January, we've decided on a a format. Now the template, did anybody feel as though there's something missing? Because I mean, there's one thing to pick a tool and there's another to pick the template. Chris, John, did that template line up with the rubric work that you guys have been doing?
Personally, I thought it was good. I mean, there might be one or two subjects you can kind of meld together, but the ratings were in line and the topics were good. I mean, we could dig a little deeper and see if there needs to be something added or subtracted, but I think as a whole, it looks good.
I like it, Perry.
Okay. So why don't, as we move forward, why don't we plan on, we'll come in, Laura and myself will come into the board meeting on whenever the heck it is, 12th, maybe 9th, whatever it is in January, with a recommendation for a tool, whether it's, we'll just use the format, whether it's, we'll use an eval tool, and we'll take that we'll go over that template with the assumption that that's sort of what we're going to put into this tool. Is that all right with folks on the board?
Yep. I do remember getting a packet, and I have like my stack of things I can go through, and then we can just see if there's anything that is on that we'd like to include or not. But I do like the one that you sent too also.
Okay.
I really just think we ought to look at the NISBA and NISCUS one. I mean, this one I brought in from Arlington, and it was a thrown together idea, because we didn't ever make any progress on getting to do what we should have done.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a lot of thought that went into the current ones that are out there, the two of them. As far as a tool, I saw SuperVal in up at a convention. I don't remember which one it was. I brought back the prices. I don't remember what they were. But to me, it's like it seems like it's a good thing to use for when you have many more than one person doing an evaluation. But when there's one-on-one, I don't see the really worth of it. So basically, that leaves us with typically, there's only one place where you have multiple people evaluating one person, and that's the board.
Well, that was I mean, you know, the pain of the last, at least for me, it's only been a couple, the pain of taking everyone's separate, you know, how they fill out that template and then trying to put it in some format that makes sense, where you don't have a comment that says great and a comment that says lousy, and then you go, well, what the heck do I do with that?
Well, I mean, I've done it maybe 10 times, and you did a fraction of what I did. So,
Yeah, well,
so, but you know, one person doing it saves a lot of money for the district. So, you
all right,
know,
let's
but
see.
it's not a fun job.
Let's so what we'll do is we'll go look at those tools, look at the prices on them, decide whether or not, I mean, worst comes to worst, we could really just do it in a, you know, on a secure Google sheet if we had to. I'm not thrilled with that idea, but you know, we can figure out how to do this. So if anybody has, you know, comments on the template, I didn't see anything come back, but if you have any comments on the template, because we'll use, no matter where we go, whether it's a tool or just using the template, that'll be the information source for it. All right.
Like I said, you know, we could use this template. To me, it's, in the past we used an informal thing, but
Well,
I think by the time May rolls around, we ought to have a better decision on what to use. And then, by the way, it's something that Laura's got to be content with too. It's not a board decides everything. It's the superintendent and board decision.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say, I think if Laura and I can spend some time looking at them and, you know, come in with a recommendation to the board. So instead of just, okay, what do we want to do? All right.
Yeah, you can do committee for that, or, you know, whatever. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we move on? All right. Advocacy. Jesus.
That was funny.
Yeah. Advocacy efforts. Thank you.
Yep, and that was just from the Coalition of the Lower Hudson, and they sent out some community templates to see if the Board of Education and superintendent were interested in supporting mostly this provide transportation aid during pandemic, as well as keep school buildings open. And so there's a little bit of a overview in the notes there, and there seemed to be interest on the board's behalf in sending out a letter to the community, and they provided a template that we could, if you would like to explore and pursue this, that we could use and just customize it to the Millbrook Central School District.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you sent this out, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago at least.
Yeah.
Any discussion from the board on, should we support it as a board? Should we, you know, are they looking for the board to do it, or are they looking for individuals? You know, individual board members, I should say.
It's a letter to your community asking for support on the issue of transportation aid, and it would be the support of the Board of Education and or the superintendent. So it was a reach, an outreach to us, to you and us.
Yeah. So what's the opinion of the board? Do we do this? I mean, to me, it seems to make, it makes total sense. We're basically asking, you know, the state to help us out, you know, and in some cases actually do what they were originally going to do.
I think if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. But if you make yourself heard, you never know. I think it's a good idea.
So we'd have to do a U.S. mailing to the community about it, right? How would we get the word out?
Unless we send it out in an email.
Email to the whole community?
Yeah.
I don't think we have everybody's email in the community.
I thought we did. Isn't that, we don't have a basic, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I was thinking with the last vote, well, not the last vote, but the vote before that, when we had to get everyone's information, but I guess maybe we don't have, so yeah. So
there's a cost involved.
well, and if it went the way of, what we had to send out to all of the voters in the district, what was that, 6,000 things that had to go out, Cheryl?
Yeah, that was, and that was for registered voters. So that was about 6,000, but we do a bulk mailing. So the post office would tell me the exact number, but that usually lands around 6,400.
Or we just do a low volume thing, put it on the website and see who website's open to anybody to look at, but typically people are not going out there looking for things to do from our website. So
well, and personally, I don't know. I never get the feeling that they listen to anything. They're not interested in at the state in what education needs.
Well, I mean,
is it really going to?
If you have a situation where you're being hit by a certain amount of money, that can light a fire under people. But right now, we don't know what the effect is exactly of these things.
Oh no, I meant more of, even if we sent out 6,000 of these things and 6,000 went to the state, are they really going to pay attention to it? Is it going to have any value?
Is there any way that we can email it to our parents at least, and then put it on, I know it's a double hit. If you're putting it on our website, it's, usually the parents that are going on the website, and maybe see what other school districts are doing. Cause if you have other boards doing it, that'll encompass a lot of people too. I'm just trying to think of also any other way to get it out to the public. But at least to hit our families with it.
How are other districts doing it? How are they getting it out to their people, to their communities?
I don't know, but I can ask.
I mean, really, for us, we've got two choices. We can either put it, as John said, put it out on the website, maybe even mail it, or email it to anyone that we have a registered email address. And work it that way, or we, send this thing out to everyone and hope they turn it around.
And Laura, just to summarize, it's basically saying if there is a micro, we're deemed a yellow zone, we're asking for financial support for testing, correct?
Correct.
So with the assumption we'd stay open, if it was a yellow zone, we need the financial support. Okay.
Yep.
Making sure.
There's also the transportation piece.
Busing, right.
And it may be even the orange zone as well.
Right.
It keeps changing. I have to read the revised revision of the revised.
So from a board standpoint, you want to just go, should we do it via a letter, or should we do it on the website, or, electronically, I guess is the right way to say it.
Is 6,400, that's $6,400, or that was 6,400 people that you sent? Okay.
Yeah.
Cheryl, wasn't there issues with some of them that were duplicates? Was that?
No, that was with the, that was actually with the vote, Claudia. But when we do a bulk mailing, it's every post office tells you how many people they have.
Oh, okay.
So, about how much a letter are we talking? Or a mail,
I'm just trying to think of what our normal bulk is when we send them out. It might be like $400 when we do a bulk mailing.
$400 mails to all 6,000.
Yeah, it's a cheaper way to mail. I can get the cost of what it would cost us to send it out. I can find out.
So
I
we
mean,
can,
if
we
it,
can do it. We can do a postcard kind of thing.
Yep,
you know,
we could,
so it
yep,
saves
and
costs.
so I could find out
So
the cost.
no
of maybe-
folding, no envelopes, all that stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if they paid for 2 COVID tests, that would be the, pay for the mailing, if we could get them to actually do that.
Yep, I can get the
Right,
numbers
so-
for you.
You know, postcard and say, see website for this thing.
Yeah. So do you guys want to wait till next meeting, or do you feel comfortable taking a straw poll on it?
I'd say wait till next meeting, get some more information.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, that was,
I mean, how is this like time sensitive, Laura? You're on mute.
Yeah, Laura.
There you go. No, you can't start it to come through.
Sorry. I didn't see anything that had a deadline on it. It was just sort of ongoing because now they've moved on to the next effort. So I think they're just rolling efforts.
All
But
right.
if I see anything, I'll let you know.
Well, you kind of want to ask for it before it happens, right? So I guess it's time sensitive in that way.
So Cheryl, if you can put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yep, I have it.
In the meantime, if we can get some, this will cost this will cost that.
Yeah, and I'll find out what other districts are doing as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Financial reports. Any comments, questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any comments, questions about this? Okay. All in favor?
Hi.
Any against? All right. Approve the agreement with New York NYLAF. Do I have a motion?
I'll
So
make a
moved.
motion.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
yeah.
All right. Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Next one is to amend the Board of Ed meeting schedule to push it out, I believe, a week for the first meeting in January. For some reason, can't bring it up. Is that a pretty, well, anyway, do I have a motion?
I'll make the
So-
motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion on it? Any questions about it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know we have our old invites in the calendar. Will we automatically, Cheryl, you just automatically send us new ones? And
Once you approve it, if you approve it, then I'll change the date in the calendar.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right, now, oops. Gotta get down here. All right. Appoint website manager Carrie Weller. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Do I have a second?
Perry, can I ask a question about it?
Not till after it's seconded.
Oh, all right, I'll second it.
All right. Any questions?
Now, can I ask the question?
Yeah, I just said, any questions?
I just want to make it sure. So the question I have is, we're going back to July 1st.
Yeah, we needed help with the content and alerts, and Kerry, who actually we posted for the job and applied for the job, was helping us all along on her off hours. So she's been doing the work all along. So thinking that we should reimburse her for her time.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess I'll say something. This is like our third website system, maybe fourth. I don't know what it is. We keep on getting these things, and it requires specialized skills, and I don't get that in this day and age. I don't understand why we have to have one person do everything.
Well, this would be managing the district of the website. The building websites are managed by correct me if I'm wrong, the principal or somebody on their team. So Cheryl and I have been really leaning on this particular position and this person, whether we didn't know if it was going to be Carrie or somebody else, to help us manage the district website. So when you see these alerts or you see these links or you see these highlights or there's content that's changing within it, that's been Carrie since July, helping us with that.
Any idea how many hours a month?
Hours a month. I think we aligned it to maybe 5 to 7 hours a week.
Around that.
7 hours of district information. Wow.
Excuse me?
There's 5 to 7 hours put into district information changing?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been using it, we've been leaning hard on her. And then I know Cheryl has been working with her behind the scenes too for many of those meetings. Do you want to speak to that, Cheryl?
Yeah, so she also helps us with the getting everything ready for board meetings when we have the different questions and we have things that have to go onto the website for all of those special meetings that we've done, all of the links. So it's been a lot of work that she's been doing to make that happen, that I would not have been able to make happen. So it's, it's every meeting, she's part of it, every board meeting that we do, and has been since COVID hit, really. And we had to do remote and change our world. So
A couple of years ago, we used to have stuff go. We used to have pictures going on every couple of days. That was Mary Lou and Phil doing that stuff. So, all right, so be it.
Well, my only comment or question is, and we've had this discussion, I don't know how many times, and not necessarily with you, Laura, is why do we have people work a job and then come in after they've been working the job and say, oh, we'd like to pay them for what they did. You can't control a budget if you're always saying, oh crap, we already spent that, you just have to write the check. So I really have a problem with us saying she's been doing the job since July. Well, then why didn't we come in July and say, we need to, Carrie's going to start putting in 7 hours a week or whatever it is. And to do this work, and I'd like you to consider a stipend so she can get paid to do it versus, and again, this isn't, this is a frustration that's been for, well, as long as I've been on the board.
I agree, Perry. We've talked about this in the past about stipends being paid for, the past when it's just the position just came about. And like you said, why wasn't this brought forward earlier?
Yeah, I know we've been down this road before, and it's nothing to do with the person or the performance. That's not even it. I know you guys agree with that. Nothing to do with that. It's the after impact of doing this now while it's developing and ongoing instead of the need or the plan ahead. I mean, I understand why it's happening and what she's doing and contributing to actually us even being able to communicate and getting our meetings done. I get that. But, I'm saying what you're both saying, at least Claudia and Perry. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've had this discussion, and again, I'm not even sure we've had it with you, Laura, but we've had this discussion time and time again about, because, and then it gets put on the board. If we vote no, it looks, we're the bad guys, because, we're not paying somebody that did a bunch of work, and how's that fair? But
It just didn't seem to be an issue until all of a sudden there was a title for this position, and then now it's coming out. It has nothing to do with the person that's in it. It's just, again, it's just the way that it's being presented now.
all right, any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against?
I don't agree with it. I'm sorry, but I just don't think it's, again, it's not the person, it's just the idea. Again, we're going back and we're paying for something, or whatever it may be. We're going backwards again.
Yep.
We're not stopping it.
Yeah, I'm going to vote no too. I mean, I just think in keeping to voting yes, we're just going to perpetuate it, and it's not.
I vote no.
I'm saying no.
All right, and then I'm saying no as well. I don't have a problem with us, doing something from here out, but we have to be given the opportunity to say yes and no before the work is done.
Laura, were these hours above and beyond what she normally works, or were they during her normal work hours?
No, they were above and beyond.
So I don't see how we can't compensate her.
Can I make a motion to start paying from here on in?
But if the hours, I don't understand, if there were hours above and beyond, why weren't we notified at that point? Why is it only coming out now, December 14th, 15th, what day is today? Whatever day today is, I have no idea. 15th.
Yeah, we spoke a number of times, I mean, even with the board, about the need for this position, and now we're just putting it in place. Is it retro? Absolutely. Carrie was just helping out on her off hours, but now that she's been doing the work, we thought it fair to pay her for her time.
What would have happened if somebody else applied for the position? What would you have done with the past hours?
We would come to the board to reimburse her for her time. We would have sought approval for that.
But again, if she's been doing this, whoever the person may be, nothing against who it is.
Well,
if the person's been going since July, you would now be coming. Again, I don't understand why it wasn't the end of July or beginning of August. Hey, somebody's been working on the website. We need to reimburse them. That it's now taken July, August, September, October, November, December to come forward.
In consideration of the board's no vote, could I again, Harry, I'm asking for a motion. Motioning to pay the position starting here on in.
Okay, do I have a second?
Explain. So from now going from December 5th, from today's date going forward, the position will be paid. Nothing retroactive.
Correct.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
So she got zero compensation for the hours that she worked on the website.
Correct.
We're supposed to.
Do I have a second?
We're supposed to vote on the motion. And then discuss.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Now, is there any comments?
Yes.
Questions?
Right.
I totally understand what everybody's saying, but the only person that really is getting hurt here is Carrie. That's my own 2 cents. I understand it's a long going thing and it needs to stop, but
Chris, we keep saying the same thing every single time this happens. We say the same thing. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And we're at that again. And it's nothing against Carrie. Absolutely not. But again, here we are. We're at an impasse once again.
I'm even just saying from a legal standpoint, I mean, we had her work and we're not compensating her, but And then the motion was passed. So, I mean, that's neither here nor there. I just, my 2 cents.
Well, we're gonna pay her from January on. We had her work without approval.
Well, she had approval. Laura just didn't have approval from the board, but
And she was really just helping us out as a community member and parent. And
okay, that's different.
We were leaning on her because she's Blackboard trained and she had the willingness to help us out. And so, and then I believe maybe in September, we mentioned it during a board meeting that there was a need and there was an emphatic yes, that we needed this help. And now here we are. Is it ideal timeline wise? Absolutely not. I hear you loud and clear. When we identified an area of need for personnel, you want to know at that moment, not 10 months later.
Well, yeah, if we have to approve money, so what are we talking for the next, from say, December on? How much are we talking about? $3,000?
$7/12 of the 5,400. That would be 3,150.
So can I modify that motion to say at, for a stipend of $3,750 through July 1st of 2021?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do I have a second on that revised motion?
Second.
Do you have any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Yeah, there's some of this stuff that we just have to get control of. Okay, the next two break my heart. Do we have a motion to accept the resignation of Pamela Jones Guida?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I cannot believe she's been here 32 years. That seems impossible. And she's all my kids had her, and I just, breaks my heart. But thank you for the years of service. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Very good. The next one is Patricia Tomaseski, retiring as of July 1st, 2021. Again, same thing. It breaks my heart to see this, but do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other commentary other than thank you so much for everything you've done, Trish? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right, number 7, with great gratitude, whoops, I lost it. Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation has sent us a donation. Do I have a motion to accept?
A motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Awesome.
And just, unbelievable thank you to them for supporting our mobile hotspots. Elliot, nice job in getting that worked out. Thanks to everybody. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right. And then accept the donation of from Cardinal Hayes of 4, don't know what they are, Vicro Zuma chairs at a value of $600 with gratitude from Cardinal Hayes. Do I have a motion to accept?
I'll make the
So
motion.
moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second or first. I don't know who said it.
Any other commentary? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next is the enrollment report, just, for giggles. Is it possible for us to see, like, these numbers include the fully remote, all 3 types of students, right?
They do.
Okay. All right. Very good. Never mind. Board docs. Where are you? All right. Do we have any questions from the public, Cheryl?
We do not.
All right. Does anyone, you see the list we're on H1, the list of things that we want to get on future agendas, a present overall of buildings and grounds, attendance updates, tenure, non-tenure review. So you see the things that we've already sort of got scheduled. Anything that, say, between now and February that we need to deal with that's not on this list? And not that all these are going to be dealt with between now and February, but hopefully we'll get started. All right. So this, what we did was we said, if you look back at the future agenda items, buildings and grounds and attendance are both on the 12th, as well as tenure, non-tenure, but we know sort of what that is. So the next section is really, these are things that we've asked for. So what are our expectations so that, when whomever comes in to present, it meets our needs. So let's start with our expectations for building and grounds. I mean,
Perry, sorry, can you elaborate? What is it that you want to do?
Well, we need to make sure that whatever we're expecting to see when they do this presentation, because these are things that we've requested over the last whatever, is what we want to see, so that they're not coming in presenting something and we go, what the hell was that for? We wanted to know this.
Oh, like a schedule, like.
Yeah, it's more of what are our expectations. So at the next meeting, we have this discussion, buildings and grounds presentation. What do we want to see covered in that presentation?
You want all the ideas now? There was no backup, and there was nothing, no explanation in the agenda about this.
It's setting, we've asked for this presentation on buildings and grounds. This was something we asked for, I don't know, over the past couple months.
Right. Were other people prepared to talk about this? Because there was nothing written in the agenda about what we're doing with this statement here. So,
if we asked for a presentation, I'm assuming we had, a reason for it, and what we wanted to see.
Well, I know we've asked for it in the past, but like a punch list, like a schedule. That's something that I'd like to see of things. It's grounds and maintenance. Like this area will be done at this point. I'm not saying it has to be March 15th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but maybe a 2-week window, like this is where it's going to be, you know, whatever the grounds and maintenance, like a schedule that it's being done, that it's just not overlooked.
Okay. Anybody else?
Are you more talking about aesthetically what we don't want to see and what we do want to see when work is done, or how are you, or is it just a very?
Well, it's there's aesthetics, but there's also, you know, it doesn't necessarily just, you know, we don't want to see plywood hanging off the side of the building anymore. And we want to, you know, those things, but there's also, you know, what are we doing? In my mind, I'm looking for efficiencies. What are we doing to slow down the, this gushing sound of us sucking down fuel oil? You know, I mean, it amazes me that the buildings can run that amount, at least what we used to see. We haven't seen it in quite a while, but what we used to see about, you know, the amount of electricity that was used, the amount of fuel oil that was burned, you know, what are we doing about that? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, we've got a plan. And some of this should come out of the building committee. Is, you know, we've got a plan. You know, someday we'll replace the windows, and someday we'll insulate, and someday we'll put LEDs in. But there's other stuff, like, isn't there something we can do to make Elm Drive, you know, more efficient? You walk in and it's 80 degrees in one room and 60 in another.
Well, every so many years, we have an energy performance contract that folks that come in and they audit the district and they try to figure out, you know, over 18 years, what things that could be done, and such that there'd be a decent payback. And the boards formally acted on some, and last set we deferred on. We could bring that back again, but there is stuff that's done. It's not like nothing's done. And I believe, well, I guess no. I guess the Elm boiler wasn't in response to an energy performance contract, I don't believe. And what we got was something that's we've had our eyes on that thing, and I think Mike early on, or maybe it was Mark, his predecessor. There wasn't much that could be done with that boiler. It is what it is. So once you start replacing a boiler, it's before it's time.
But that's the kind of stuff, from my expectations, I want to see, what are we doing? Like, you know, are we doing an energy, whatever the formal name is, audit? You know, when are we going to have a plan put together for improving? You know, if we could cut the fuel oil in half at Alden and Elm and the middle school, we could probably pay for, you know, who knows what we could end up paying for if we could cut down that amount of spending. But
Perry, when you were on the board, we had an energy performance contract. Folks come in and they weighed different things, and those were not part of it. They did not find the savings to replace a brand new boiler.
Well, I'm not saying you have to replace the boiler. I'm not convinced that the one boiler that they wanted that they came in and showed was to put a backup boiler in Alden. And that just, to me, ties us to fossil fuel for another 15 or 20 years. You can't, you know, we're not going to can a boiler that's brand new. And so, and I mean, but there's a lot of things that, you know, that facilities should have in a plan. You know, what do they need? What do they need to do? You know, do they understand our approach to this? So that's my expectation, is to see, what are we doing beyond, you know, putting some paint on the wall and you know, changing a lens on a light. Are we doing an energy contract? When will we see that? You know, because again, I hate, just sort of personally hate seeing
Well, it would have to be a new thing starting because our personnel doesn't go out and get energy performance contracts every year. They don't, that's not what we do. So
Yeah, but this
you
is,
have to initiate something new.
it's been, well, yeah, it's been 3 or 4 years since the last one.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, are we doing it or not? Or is that something that Buildings and Grounds expects the board to say, now go forward and fix this? Did somebody?
Mike.
Mike
Can I say
has
something?
something to say.
Yeah, I've been trying. So, can you hear me? Yeah. So I've had 3 temperature control companies come and look. The high school is at the end of life, and I'm getting different pricing on the temperature control at the high school, so we can do some repairs. We've been doing repairs. We've been having some problems, and they're telling us it's at the end of life, and some of the new controls won't work with the old system. I've had 3 companies come and look at that. I've had 2 companies come and look at Alden to upgrade and do some repairs to try and save on some fuel.
But Mike, all we're doing is trying to set the expectation. We're not trying to actually do the presentation now.
Okay, well, I'm just giving you an idea that we're not just sitting.
Yeah, no, but this is what we want to hear about. This,
Okay.
at least personally, I want to see what's on your agenda.
Okay.
And are there other things you could do? But right now you're told not to spend money. If I had $1,000, I could save $100,000 by doing this. So, just what is the plan? What is the plan for? I think we got some new folks on our maintenance team, but right now everybody just basically runs around sanitizing the place. Where are we headed? That's my expectation. I'll open it to the rest of the board, because this is really to make sure that when Laura and Brian and Mike come in to talk about facilities, buildings and grounds, that we're getting our questions answered.
Perry, I know that we did a walkthrough back in October, I believe. September, October timeframe. How about some updates on some of the stuff that we had talked about then? I know one thing, I'm looking through pictures that I took right now, are the sidewalks and the much needed repair of the sidewalks, the high school, the middle school, Elm Drive. I'm looking at the photos, the cracks in the sidewalk, stuff like that. The front of the Elm Drive, some sort of, maybe some bushes, some beautification in front of Elm Drive down there. There's some tripping hazards and stuff like that around the school. So, I mean, where are we on that?
And just so when we say the board's I'm expecting, a presentation, something that we, if we're going to start an energy audit in September, then in this presentation, it says energy audit starting in September of 2021. Again, I'm just making up dates and subjects, but because I want to have, I don't want to just have to keep doing these where we, geez, what was that? I know, were we supposed to? I think we did, didn't we? I mean, there's, especially with facilities, we need to get, here's what we're going to do, and here's our target. We're going to, and some of this is going to lead us to more district and board goal discussion. Our target is to reduce our energy consumption by 20% by 2024. How are we getting there? And I'm making that up.
Perry, would it be okay with the board if we invited our energy performance contract consultants to a meeting to give a general overview of that process? Because there is some nice solar opportunities that we're learning about, and there are if the board had a general overview of that process from our consultants, that may help to pave the way. So we would like the opportunity to do that if that's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, personally, I'm very interested in it, but
I'd agree with that. Brian, is there a way to get energy audits that don't have to be restricted to just energy performance contracts? There must be other companies that probably provide updates to things, or these systems that don't necessarily have to go out via an energy performance contract, although that is desirable. I'm not saying it's not, it is. But the things that the performance, these energy performance contracts don't do, that other companies do, that maybe we would use capital money for, you know.
Yes, the answer to that is definitely yes. And in fact, Perry introduced us to a company that does work. You know, some of the issue is sometimes the work is conflicting in a school environment. Sometimes the work is conflicting with an energy performance contract, because what they'll do oftentimes is they'll do kind of what we would refer to as the low-hanging fruit, like LED lighting, and they'll take away the cost benefit of you'll remember a couple of years ago, we did an energy performance contract and we were going to get a boiler and it was the backup boiler. We were going to get LEDs across the district. We were going to get the replacement of all the old pneumatic controls over at Elm Drive that would have started to make us more efficient, all at no cost to the taxpayers. But at that time, we opted not to do that because of the board kind of felt, well, we don't know what we're doing with whether or not we're closing a building or not. Let's wait until we have some decisions that we're making on that, and before we maybe throw good money after bad. So that was a decision that was made at that point. There's whole new opportunities with all technology, new technologies that the board may want to consider, and that could also involve inviting some of the other companies in here that do that you can just go ahead and purchase a service from, maybe using a purchasing consortium, and maybe for expediency's sake, the board would say, well, maybe we're going to leave some of the aid on the table. Maybe we're going to not utilize an energy performance contract because the quickness with which we would be able to get it done otherwise is that much more important. And it would be a consideration that the board might want to make. These are all also, Claudia, when we do the facilities committee, you know, it could also be presentations at the facilities committee that we might want to invite them in to do those types of presentations in order to be able to get a recommendation to the board. So there's a lot of, and frankly, we're also working with Central Hudson, and this could be part of our presentation. We're working on some benchmarking with them to find out really how woeful our energy consumption is, and it's pretty bad, and we do have improvements that we have to make, and frankly, our building envelope issues are significant. We have 1960 single pane windows in 2 of our buildings, you know, so that doesn't help at all. So there's a whole host of things that we would be doing, but of course, we're going to be engaging an architect on a long range plan. So all of this timely, all of this important, and oftentimes, John, to answer your part of your question, we would, and we've done this before, we would think about engaging maybe in an energy performance contract concurrently with a capital plan, where we're going to go out and get a referendum from our voters to move forward. So,
yeah, you know, also I'd be also interested in probably one of these groups probably could answer this question, but you know, our governor's got a plan for the state trying to reduce energy consumption. It seems to me, is there somewhere written down a vision of where schools fit into this? Because there may be a good time to do these things where there's, well, I hate this, well, it's probably futile thinking this, but maybe there's some aid available, you know, for when to do these things. It could be 5 years from now, 1 year from now, I'm not sure, 10 years from now. But, you know, schools are like you say, kind of inefficient and backwards sometimes, and that's some of the times it's the best investments to make to try to save on fossil fuels.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what I'd like to see from this buildings and grounds discussion is, here's, you know, put them in 3 categories. You know, we got short-term stuff, we got middle term. You know, like that ramp over at the high school, Brian, I know you and I were looking at it going, holy crap, the railings almost broke out of the other side of the thing. is that something we need to do? Are we gonna, do we need to get somebody in to structurally do that? I don't want to see us every year go over there and throw mortar on top of it and hopefully it sticks around for 6 months.
And you're right, Perry, that's the exact reason why it wouldn't be a quick fix. While something like that is going to be every bit of a capital project that needs to be planned, it wouldn't be where we see it, we walk through it, we look at it in September and October and say we have a plan to fix it, because that's going to be a capital project that the board is going to have to approve after it's engineered.
So, I mean, to me, again, this is supposed to be board expectations, but my personal expectations are, where are we going? I want to see, we've got all these, we've got some minor, I'll call them short-term projects, stuff maybe we can get done for the 275 a year. But then there's this middle term projects that are critical, like, I got to believe that ramp is going to become unsafe if we don't do something. So maybe that's we know it's a capital project. We know it needs an architect, but it also needs to be high priority. And I personally want to see us get buildings and grounds into a much more, here's where we're going, not just fighting the fires, but here's where we're going. And this is what it's going to take to get there.
Can I say something? I think we have a building committee, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have a board person as chairperson.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
start
working on this issue. We have a 5-year-old building condition survey. We talked about getting a new one. That would be very helpful, but you can look at the old one, because the old one still has some things that haven't been addressed, and they've probably gotten worse since then. And as a matter of fact, the last one we got was never fully complete in my mind. I've asked 3 times to have an update on useful life, and there were some things not completed, some columns not completed, and put it in a spreadsheet. Never got that. So, I'm looking forward to whenever we get a new survey. And I know we're not at the top of the list, as Brian's mentioned, maybe 6 months to a year ago. So, I guess we're waiting for our building survey eventually to come around to whenever it's our turn.
Yeah. That's part of that's also, to me, one of the things that is even trouble with, these energy surveys is, okay, so if it takes me 2 years to get it done and then another year to get the project done, and I could have saved $100,000 a year, there's $300,000 I'll never get back. So, I mean, a lot of these processes don't lend themselves well to doing critical projects, to getting stuff done that impacts people right now. But
the building one of the things that I was heartened to see. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
You got it.
So the company that we were put in touch with, Perry, from you, they actually reached out to us and said, hey, I have a great person for you to talk to. And they sent us the name of our energy consultants. Their Brightcore is even coming around, and I think they're going to be looking to be working as an ESCO in that space, realizing that is right now, that's one of the preeminent paradigms for a school district. So that was good to see. And they may end up being a successful bidder in the process. So even as part of our and Mike's presentation next time, is it too quick, or if they are available, would you be interested in getting a short board presentation and overview of the entirety of an energy performance contract for next meeting?
I mean, if they can, I mean, sometimes it's you really, I think the board needs to hear it. I mean, I think there's only 3 people that were on the board now that were even a part of, and I think it was my first 6 months on the board when the last energy audit went So I think it's a great thing to do if we can just, I don't really want to spend 5 hours, going through the gory detail of that. But if they can boil it down and kind of make it help everybody understand what the net result is, that would be good. Anyone else?
I was just going to say that the facilities committee has, this is what I thought what they're supposed to be looking at. That was last year. We never had a meeting last year.
Yeah.
The board's got to find a way to start looking at some of these things. You're sort of asking to bring it to 7 people, whereas I think that group was charged with kind of figuring out, miring through what things, to kind of focus on. And last year we talked about, about a year ago, we talked about working on the next phase of a capital plan, and there's been no work done on that. So
I mean, we really need to, if we've signed up to be the chair of a subcommittee, we've got to step it up. And you can't always wait for everybody's schedules to align. But we need these committees to really get back and get engaged. All right. And so the next one on the board expectations for the attendance report, I think, and I'm going to throw it out there. I think this was sort of a reaction to the article that was in that NYSBA paper about, students just sort of disappearing and skipping school. And so I think this was, and again, folks, please don't let me speak for you. But I think that's what this was related to. Are we, how are we doing? Are we seeing this issue in our district? What are we doing about it? Anyone?
It's good information to know. I think a few meetings back we had discussed it, right, Laura? If I'm not mistaken, you went over that information. Probably might have been in September, or I'm sorry, in October. You talked about attendance and how many people missed. It was a very low number that were missing classes, right?
Yeah, but I think it's probably time to revisit and just see.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I'll just add, from working on the policy committee, let's not go in there, but quite yet, but there actually is a requirement that boards look once a year at attendance, typically probably end of the year. And we really should be, once the policies go in, it's going to require us to part of our policy. It's not specific in there now, but here again, like I say, the state requires every board to do it. I don't think most boards do it, but that doesn't make it right. So, and I think the purpose is to take a look and see, just to educate the board on where attendance is, and maybe the board is concerned or is not concerned.
Laura, what is the policy for the attendance if they miss so many? What is the policy?
I'll have to look at the policy. I don't know if anybody, Caroline or Brian, know the policy.
Yeah, there's a loss of credit. If they miss a certain number of days, there's a loss of credit they can make up with hours, on task hours that they can make up for to be able to regain their credit. So even if they're passing, but they don't have time on task, they can actually lose credit in their courses.
So maybe we can include, some of that specifics on when we go through it next time.
Yeah,
So
review the policy.
When we talk, I could send somebody, some clues about that. The board is supposed to get a report once a year, so we should probably start honoring that.
Yeah, Caroline, when we give her the presentation, I would put in there maybe about, this is the consequences, so the parents can hear, and they can talk directly to their kids too, if they're watching, that if the attendance isn't there, this is the consequence to that action. put it out there instead of them trying to find it in a book or policy, like the parents trying to find it, that, we say it out loud and they could hear it.
Hey, John, is in the policy that's going to go out, is there a specific time frame, like end of year, or is it sort of just needs to be once a year?
Can you rephrase that?
You said when the new policy goes out, it'll have specific, a specific requirement for us to do that review once a year. Does it say like when? Okay.
I don't recall. It would probably make sense to do it at the end of the year.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's one of the things that we can discuss during this. Actually looking at the attendance reports is when we want to see it.
Right.
And then we can get Cheryl to put that into the calendar for things that we have to do.
Yeah.
Whenever.
Yeah, this is for a normal year. I understand the COVID focus.
Yeah. It also fits nicely with the equity work that we're doing. This might be a piece to the inventory.
Okay. All right. All right. So, do I have? Can't I get in there? Do I have a motion to go to executive session, discuss matters that will imperil our public safety as well as require legal counsel?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Right, so Cheryl, we need to start is the board and Laura and Margot.
Can I just go to the ladies' room quick? Don't start without me.
Sure. All right, Cheryl.
I just have to check in with Margot because she was called in with another meeting, so I have to email her.
Okay.
Make your breakout rooms and everything. I let Margot know, so.
Okay.
And you should all see your invites. Do you see them?
Nope. I don't.
Do you see them now?
Got it.
Ignore room 1.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.